Okay, so today what we're going to do is we're going to draw a minimalist style portrait of the Green Lantern. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my rounded rectangle tool. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and draw a rounded rectangle. And I'm going to use this rounded rectangle to turn it into his head. So now that I have this drawn, I'm going to grab my direct selection tool. And with the direct selection tool, I'm going to grab this bottom anchor point on the left and I'm going to drag it down. Then I'm going to grab this bottom anchor point on the right and drag it down. And we're going to create a jawline for our character here. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw some ears. So to draw his ears, I'm going to grab my ellipse tool and I'm going to draw an oval here on the side of his head. And then I'm going to grab my direct selection tool and I'm going to grab the bottom anchor point and pull it down to create his ear. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a copy of that ear. So with my shape selected, I'll hit Control C, then I'll hit Control V to paste it. And then I'm going to go ahead and reflect it. So I'm going to right click and I'm going to go down to Transform and I'm going to choose Reflect. I'm going to go ahead and reflect it vertically. I'll click OK. I'm going to line it up here on the other side of his head. I'm going to select these two ears. So if you click on the one ear, hold Shift, click on the next, you can select them both without selecting the head as well. And I'm going to go ahead and send these to the back. So I'll right click, go down to Arrange, and Send to Back. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to split his face in half. So to split his face in half, what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my scissor tool. So under your eraser icon, if you click and hold, you can switch from the eraser tool to the scissor tool. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in the center here at the top and I'm going to click on that point at the top and then I'm going to click on this point on the bottom. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and color his face in. So if I double click on my fill color here, I can choose a color, so I'll go ahead and click OK. And I'm going to color the other side of his face, but I'm going to make it a darker shade. So I'll double click on this fill, and I'll make it a little bit darker. So we'll have two sides of his face. So I'll go ahead and color this ear the same color as this side, and then I'll color the other ear the same color. So I'm going to grab my eyedropper and I can just suck out the color there. Alright, so now that I've got color in there, I'm going to go ahead and remove my stroke. So I don't want to have a stroke anywhere in my picture from here on out. So with these two halves of the face, I'm going to take my selection tool, select them, and then I'm going to group them together. So if you right click while you have those two things selected, you can go ahead and group it. And the reason I'm going to group it together is because I'm going to add a cast shadow to this. And if it's not grouped together, you're going to have a cast shadow that runs through the middle. So to get my cast shadow, I'm going to go under Effect, I'm going to go to Stylize, and I'm going to choose Drop Shadow. And then I'm going to add this little drop shadow that comes underneath him here. So I have my X offset set to 0, my Y offset set to 0.2, and I'll go ahead and click OK. Okay. Now, what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to draw his neck. So to draw his neck, I'm going to grab my rectangle tool, and I'm going to draw a rectangle that's not quite as wide as his head, but close. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to warp this shape. So while the shape is still selected, I'm going to go under Effect, I'm going to go to Warp, and I'm going to choose Arc. And I'm going to make sure that's set to horizontal. And I'm only going to bend this about, we'll say about 5%, 5 or 6%, negative 5 or 6%. Go ahead and click OK. And now what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to send this to the back. So if you right click, you can go Arrange, and we'll send that to the back. Okay, so now what we need to do is maybe give him some hair. So we're going to build his hair using our ellipse tool. And I'm going to draw an ellipse here on top of his head, here on the side, and right here on the other side. And we're going to alter this a little bit to make it look a little nicer, a little more hair-like. But the first thing I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to change the color to brown. So let's grab my swatches. I'm going to make that brown. Now I'm going to grab my direct selection tool, and I'm going to pull this anchor point down a little bit, and I'm going to convert it to a corner. So when you've got that selected, come up to the top, we can convert that to a corner. Alright, so now I'm going to do something similar here on the other side. I'll bring that down, and I'm going to convert that to a corner. And we'll just adjust this shape a little bit. I'll take my direct selection tool. Let me push that up a little bit. I don't want his hair to look too Lego Man-like. Maybe a little bit, but not overly. So just make a few little adjustments to get the shape of the hair right. Okay. Adjust those handles a little bit, curve those in, grab the handles, adjust that. Alright, now that I've got his hair adjusted how I want it, I'm going to take my selection tool, I'm going to select the 3 parts of the hair. Now I'm going to take my Pathfinder tool, and I'm going to unite the hair pieces together, so it'll be one solid piece. Okay, so I'm going to do one more thing with this, and I'm going to create a little curl that's going to come down the front of his head. So, I'm going to maybe change the shade of brown, something lighter, so it'll stand out on top. I'm going to take my direct selection tool, I'm going to convert this bottom to a corner, and then we're going to warp the shape. So I'm going to go warp, arc, and I'm going to switch it to vertical, and I'm going to do, about negative 75%. I'll keep everything else set to 0, click OK. And since I warped the shape, I now need to expand the appearance. So if you go under Object, select Expand Appearance, it will now recognize the new shape that we made. Alright, so we're going to put that here in the middle on top of his head. Okay, now we'll go ahead and build his mask. Okay, so to make his mask, I'm going to take my ellipse tool, and I'm going to draw an ellipse here over his face. We'll make that green. Now I'm going to make a few adjustments with the handles of my anchor point here. And I'm going to add a couple anchor points to this. So if you go under your pen tool, you can switch that to add anchor point. And I'm going to add an anchor point here on the left, and I'm going to add one here on the right. And then I'm going to take my direct selection tool, I'm going to pull down this. Okay, so what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to grab my scissor tool. We're going to snip on the top, and we're going to snip on the bottom. I'll take my direct selection tool, select the other half, and then we're going to color that a darker shade of green. Okay, now what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to open up my layers. I'm going to lock this layer for a minute. I'm going to create a brand new layer. In my new layer, I'm going to take my rectangle tool, and I'm going to draw a rectangle the size of my artboard. I'm going to drag this layer underneath layer 1, and I'm going to draw another rectangle on the side of his head, and I'm going to make this one a darker shade of green. So we're going to use this one to create a shadow for the side of his head. So with my direct selection tool, I'll grab this anchor point, drag it down, grab this other one, we'll drag it down a little bit. We're going to create kind of a hint of a shoulder here on the side of his head. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and lock this layer. I'm going to go back to layer 1, and I'm going to unlock it. Now on layer 1, we're going to go ahead and draw his logo. So I'm going to grab my ellipse tool, and I'm going to hold shift while I draw a circle. And I'm going to make this circle white. And then I'm going to grab my rectangle tool, and I'm going to draw a rectangle, and I'm going to make that one green. And then I'm going to go ahead and copy it by hitting Control C and Control V Then I'll take my selection tool, I'm going to line this up here along the bottom. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my ellipse tool, and we're going to draw an ellipse here in the center. So hold shift while you draw it to make it a perfect circle. We'll line this up here in the center. And then I'm going to make a copy of this by hitting Control C and then Control F to paste it on top. And the reason I'm going to paste it on top is because I'm going to scale down the size. So if you right click, you can go to Transform Scale. We'll scale that down 50%. I'll click OK. Now I'm going to select this circle here that I just changed the shape of. I'll select the original circle, use my Pathfinder tool, divide it, ungroup it, deselect it, and then delete the middle piece. I'll select the three parts of the lantern, use my Pathfinder, unite it together, put that right here in the center. And there we have it.